So you are a designer who has either made a widget or made a thing or made a vase or made a lamp or whatever it might be, and you're making the decision of whether you want to share the files to everybody else for commercial licenses or printing on their home printers, or if you actually want to start selling the prints of the thing itself. And in this video, we're kind of going to discuss the pros and cons of both, as well as the considerations within both. So first of all, you need to know who is interested in your thing. Did you post an Instagram of your 3D print of your new design, and then it just went viral and blew up? If it had really a lot of reach, as in like more than 100,000 views or so, you are getting interest probably from people who are outside of the 3D printing world, which means that your market is outside of the 3D printing world. Now, if you have views lower than that, you're probably staying inside of the 3D printing space, which means that people who own a 3D printer are interested in what you're making. So there's this evaluation that you need to do at the beginning, which is who is your customer? Based on who your customer is, that will decide kind of the direction you need to go. If 3D printing people are watching your stuff, then they are more interested in the files than in the prints. But if normal folks are watching your stuff, they're more interested in the actual object than in the files, because they're never going to print it themselves. So that's kind of an initial evaluation to do. Okay, let's presume that it's kind of the lower traffic view or primarily 3D printing people, or you look inside your comments and everybody says, where are the files? Where are the files? Where are the files? So you decide to go the direction of using files. Here are the things that you need to be aware of. Number one, there's a lot of platforms to sell files on. There's Things, there's MakerWorld, there's your own website. You can put up a PayPal link with a Google Drive. All of these things are ways of selling files. Here's the thing though, once you sell a file, you lose control of that file. Now, generally within the 3D printing space, people have a pretty good morals and ethics to where they won't purchase the file and then immediately reshare it someplace else on their own profile. And the platforms themselves do a pretty good job of content moderation to make sure that files aren't replicated. But it is still a danger. And if you are doing it yourself, where you're sharing the files through your own website, there's a real danger of losing the files because people can basically just bulk download them and upload them someplace else as their own, so there's a real danger of losing your files. The other thing too, once you sell the file, you're done. They can create as many prints of this as they possibly want, and it doesn't really stop them at all. So you don't have recurring revenue. You will sell the files once and then you won't ever sell them again until like 5 years from now when maybe the trend comes around and new people with new printers go by. So there's a limit to how much you can scale on that. If you're wanting to make a business out of selling your files, what you very often have to do is end up going like a subscription route where you use Patreon or Things in order to share your files, but then you continuously create new files every month so your subscribers have a reason to continue to subscribe. There is new content every week, every month, whenever it may be. Now, if you're really good at designing pull behind ducks and everybody will keep on buying more pull behind ducks from you, that could be a really good model. But it does require that you continue to invest into it. It doesn't create long-term sort of value. You have to churn and garden and cultivate and continue to create new stuff. And this can be the danger of creating 3D models, and that you have to continue creating 3D models. But what is the alternative? The alternative is printing them. Okay, so you did the post and it got 1 million views because people outside of 3D printing saw it. Okay, so you're thinking about, oh, I should start printing and selling these things because a lot of people want these little pull behind ducks. Well, here is the question now. How do you want to produce these? Do you want to start your own print farm or do you want to use a service? So in our case right here, full disclosure, we have a service called Teleport where people can upload a 3D model and immediately have that model printed and shipped when they get orders in from the Etsy. That way no one has to build a print farm. They don't have to learn how to ship or anything else. So this is where I'm coming from, just so you all know. But if you're building your own print farm, this can be a more cost-effective way of doing it. You can get more profit from it because you don't have to bill a chart, have another person also having to make money. So building your own print farm is an option, but this means that you do now have to do all of the infrastructure. You have to print each part, know which printer you need to purchase. You need to maintain those printers. You need to turn them on, keep them operating, or find the software to keep them operating. You need to figure out how to ship stuff. But again, all of that stuff is fine if you're internalizing it because it gives you really good control of the parts and really tight iteration cycles between the files and you. The alternative for using a service is that it's much more passive and hands-off. You still have to design the products and take care of customers and that kind of thing, but you don't have to print the parts, you don't have to pack the parts, you don't have to ship the parts. All of that stuff happens in the background. So once a design is done, you can upload it and say, this is what it is, it's going to ship in 3 to 4 days, and then just kind of let it run. So it's much more hands-off than if you are continually running and packing parts yourself. So those are the two ways of selling the parts themselves. You can use a service or you can build your own print farm to do it. And again, that decision is totally up to you and based on what your goals are. Do you want it to be more work where you take it internally, but you can make some more money off of it? Or do you want it to be passive to where you just let it run and it's a thing that runs on the side and it's more like kind of uploading files? That's your decision. We talk more about how to price and how to set up your own business in your print farm or use Teleport and so on and so forth in other videos. So go ahead and check out those links down in the description to see some of those. Now, where can you make the most money? This is the real question that people always ask here. Is it more profitable to sell the file or is it more profitable to sell the prints? Well, there's two ways of looking at this. If you're selling the file, you can only sell the file to the people in the world who have a 3D printer. Right now, that's about 2 million people on the planet who have or have had a 3D printer before. That is growing, but that's the maximum number of times you can sell it. If you're selling the object, now you're dealing with the number of people who buy stuff. It depends on the individual market. Like only a certain number of people buy lamps, only a certain number of people will buy vases. But ultimately, normal folks are more common than people with 3D printers. There are way more people without 3D printers who need to purchase the actual physical part than there are people with 3D printers. The other thing to consider here is, quite frankly, people purchasing the files who purchase the file and then have to print it themselves. They have a lot of costs involved in that. So they're going to want to pay somewhere between $1 and maybe $5 for the file. You can sometimes get more if it's a really complex piece, but for something like this, the file would maybe be $1 to $3. So you get to sell that file once and then it's gone and it's out of your control, and then they can print it off. And that's all the money you will make from it. So if you sold to every single person with a 3D printer and you sold for $3 each one of these things, the maximum amount of money you can make is $3 million. However, toy companies are a lot bigger than $3 million. If you start selling the prints of this, you're now able to sell to every mom who's making a toy for their kid, who's looking for new toys that are like wood but cheaper and have more variation and more capability, that kind of thing. So you have a lot more addressable market to where you've got 8 billion people, let's say the United States, half of the United States, 100 million people who are mothers, grandmothers, have a young child who they want to get a toy for. That's the number of people you can potentially sell for there. So it is almost fully 100 times bigger than if you're selling to just guys with 3D prints. When you're selling these physical objects too, this thing you might be able to sell for $9, $10. The cost to make it is $3 or $5. So you're making $5 off of every one of the prints of this when you were only making $3 off of every one of the files. So it always will depend on what your individual object is, but generally you have more customers and more value from the actual physical object than you can from the actual files, because the files can only go to guys with 3D printers and have to be reasonably cheap because they're going to have to go find another file later. So they're kind of a bulk sort of an option, as opposed to somebody buying an object where it's a decision and the object has more value because it's done and ready to go. That's the thing to consider. Where can you make more money? A lot of people are making a lot of money selling files, but there are way bigger places and bigger markets to address by selling the actual prints. Have a great day, everybody.